It's finally time to start the YT Jeffsy Base versus Ibis Ripmo AF Aluminum All-Mountain Showdown. And I thought I'd start with at least an attempt at a more objective comparison. Kinda. In fact, you know what? Before we even go any further, keep in mind that everything you see in this and future Ripmo versus Jeffsy videos is just my opinion. I'm one person and I'm not very good at mountain biking, so take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Okay, I'm not going to go over all the bike specs, but I do want to start by highlighting a few that stand out to me. As you can see, the Ripmo AF is slightly longer with a wheelbase of 1,237mm compared to the Jeffsy's 1,226. At 65 degrees, the Ripmo is also a degree slacker in terms of head tube angle. The Jeffsy's seat tube angle is steeper, but the Ripmo AF's reach is slightly longer. As you can see, these are all very minor differences. In terms of parts, they're both budget builds, but still mostly quality. On the Jeffsy, I was underwhelmed with the SX shifter and derailleur, so those have been upgraded to GX. On the Ripmo, I hated the stock KS Rage Eye dropper, so that's been replaced with a PNW components dropper and loam lever. The biggest parts difference between the two is probably the more tunable DVO suspension that's on the Ripmo. Oh, and in terms of weight, I don't know what weights the companies claim, but when I weighed them, they actually ended up exactly the same. 35.2 pounds for a size large with pedals. Okay, now let's get into some slow-mo comparisons. Okay, we're going to start with a jump, and I'm going to try to shoot all of these in super slow-mo, not because any of this is going to look super awesome or because I have any idea what I'm doing, but so that you can kind of see in slow motion what's going on with the bikes, and just so you have that information if it's going to be meaningful to you. It might not, who knows, let's see. For all of these tests, I tried to alternate between the Jeffsy and the Ripmo, going back and forth to see if I noticed a difference in feel. To be honest, I really didn't on the jumps. I still don't really know how to jump though, so I'm really not qualified to compare them on this anyway. Let's move on. When bunny hopping, again, I didn't notice a huge difference. If anything, the Ripmo was a bit poppier, but I think that probably comes mostly down to differences in the rebound on the rear shock. In these videos, I'm clearly getting more height on the Ripmo, but I have gotten similar height from the Jeffsy before. All right, so the verdict on the bunny hopping, I didn't really notice that much of a difference there either. If anything, I'd say maybe the Ripmo felt a little bit easier to get up. I'm not really sure why that is, but not a big difference. You can certainly bunny hop them both. And now we're gonna do the drop, which is the part I'm a little bit scared about. I was scared about the drop in part because I was concerned I might break another crank arm on the Ripmo. But it ended up handling this roughly 3-foot drop to flat just fine. In fact, the drop was the test where I felt the biggest difference between the two bikes. The Ripmo felt a little less harsh on the landing, which is to be expected given its longer travel, but it also felt a little more stable in the air. I'm not sure why that would be the case, but that's the way it felt for me. Just for the heck of it, I also took both of the bikes onto the skinny. I don't think this is a very meaningful test, but the Jeffsy definitely won this round. It's clear I need a bit more practice balancing the Ripmo. Finally, I took both bikes on some laps of the little downhilly section of our backyard trail. The Ripmo definitely felt a little bit faster here, in part because it felt like I was getting a bit more out of pumping it. That could be related to the suspension platform, but honestly, it might also just be that the slightly longer reach and wheelbase is a better fit for my body than the Jeffsy. Or it could be something completely different. I don't know, but what I do know is that pumping on the Ripmo feels a little bit better. Okay, so first of all, before I go any further, I do want to say this isn't it. We're going to be doing more tests on real trails, one bike versus the other bike, obviously. But I kind of wanted to, I thought it made sense to start out somewhere where we can kind of isolate one thing at a time in a place that's really familiar to me, to try to take as much of my technique and my skill and my familiarity with the trail, to just try to take those elements out of the test a little bit, at least for this part. That said, my skill, my technique, or lack thereof, is certainly the biggest factor in all of these tests. So you should not watch this and come to the conclusion that the Ripmo is definitely better at this, or the Jeffsy is definitely better at that. These are just my impressions based on the two bikes that I have and based on the skills and experience that I have. Fucking mosquitoes, I'm getting killed out here. So with those disclaimers, here are kind of my big takeaways. Jumping, I wouldn't say there's any difference between the two bikes. Dropping to flat, I would say the Ripmo felt a little bit better. Not a huge difference there, but I would say the Ripmo edged the Jeffsy a little bit. Bunny hopping, I wouldn't say there's a big difference. The Ripmo might be a little poppier, but I'm 99% sure that's just the way that the shock is tuned and the rebound comparison. I don't think that's actually anything to do with the bike. And really the technique is the big factor there anyway. So I don't think there's a big difference in terms of bunny hopping. And yeah, in terms of the riding on my little woods trail here, I would say the Ripmo feels like it's a little bit easier to pump. I'm not sure that's anything to do with the bike. It might just be that the bike actually, just that length is like a little bit of a better fit for me. So it just feels more natural for me. I feel like I'm getting a little bit more out of pumping when I come over the little sort of like rollers that are out here. So that's one factor. It does feel like it's a little bit less squirrely and a little bit more of a plow over kind of some of the bigger stuff, which again, you would expect. It's got a longer wheelbase, it's got a little bit more travel. And then on that skinny with a little drop at the end, I would say the Jeffsy actually felt better there. The Ripmo felt a little bit kind of squirrely. I don't know if that's something to do with the bike. It might just be that I'm a lot more used to the Jeffsy. I've got over 1,000 miles on the Jeffsy at this point, so balance on that, it's about as good as it's ever gonna get, whereas the Ripmo, I've got about 20 miles. So it could be that, could be something to do with the bikes, I'm not sure, but I think the footage will make it pretty clear which of the two bikes I felt more comfortable on that skinny. So overall, if I had to declare a winner for these tests, I would say the Ripmo probably takes it by a nose, just because it was a little bit better on the drop and it feels a little bit better pumping. But again, that may have a lot more to do with me than it actually has to do with the bikes. It's very close. And you would expect, like the Ripmo should win. Let's not forget this bike is more expensive than the Jeffsy. But this is just, you know, kind of a quick test around the house. So in the next video, we're going to take these out on some real trails and actually see what they're like in the wild, which is obviously going to be quite different from what we're doing here. So yeah, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe, stay tuned, stick around, because one of these bikes is going to win. One of these bikes is getting sold, and I still don't know which one. I honestly, genuinely don't know which one. So yeah, stick around and find out.